Hello, I'm Bill Drummond. I'm very honored to be here today. Several months ago, I told my good friend Susan Ackerman her interview on Public Power Underground was further confirmation that she is one of the cool kids. So when Therese Hampton reached out to me about hosting, I knew I had finally made it. Now, I did ask Paul to keep the cultural references age appropriate. Please, no games requiring knowledge of Parks and Rec or the latest Fred Lasso episode. Ask me about Arrested Development, Firefly, or the Grateful Dead, and we're good. Recently, the Public Power Underground featured interviews with Jesse Jenkins and Deborah Smith. They were asked about attracting young people to public power and the electric utility business. Jesse talked about being able to directly address carbon reduction and climate change, while Deborah added points about selling the purpose and selling the moment. Having been in the power business for over 40 years and with almost all of that working for or representing public power systems, I thought about why I was drawn to public power. Certainly, I like the idea of local control, where people receiving the service get to vote on the governance of the utility. If you want to see a demonstration of democracy in action, go to a rural electric cooperative annual meeting. The opportunity to help provide an essential service at cost and trying to minimize that cost were also part of the equation. When you sit in utility boardrooms and listen to discussions about who gets cut off and who doesn't, or you hear a utility manager talking with someone who can't pay their bill and is in danger of being shut off, providing that essential service at cost gets real very fast. Local control and providing an essential service at cost were what got me started. But what kept me going with public power was working with so many amazing people. Some were public power legends, like Alan Jones, the father of the Public Power Council, and mentors for me, like Aldo Benedetti from Tacoma Public Utilities, and Alex Radin, who was for 35 years head of the American Public Power Association. The vast majority I was blessed to work with, however, were regular people, farmers, ranchers, small business owners, folks from all walks of life who believed in the value of public service and were willing to commit their time and energy to helping their local communities. These were the people who were my inspiration. So when asked to encourage a young person to join a public power utility, I would say this. If you want a career that will help the world reduce carbon emissions and slow the growth of greenhouse gases, if you want to do something about economic equity and believe that people should have a direct say in how their local utility is governed, and if you want to work with amazing people who share your values, public power is for you. Thank you.
We started in hard times to bring us all into the laughter through thick.
Welcome to Public Power Underground, Public Power's premier infotainment program that covers public power and public power adjacent news from a power department's perspective. I'm a longtime friend of the Underground, BPA Administrator Emeritus, former manager of the Public Power Council, and chair of the Western Power Pool, and this week's celebrity guest host, Bill Drummond.
And I'm Dan Catchpole, contributing editor to Clearing Up, and this week's podcast ambassador from News Data. And Paul wanted me to say,
yeah, you missed something there, Dan. I put it in the script. You got to read the script, Dan. Come on now. Sorry,
it's outside my nature. But
I'll do it for you. A member of a two-time Pulitzer-nominated newsroom. Did I do that right, Dan?
Yes. And I was involved with the work. It wasn't.
And
just
it wasn't just like you're part of the team.
Like
you did some of this.
Like
Congratulations.
mopping the floor.
Yes, and you interviewed Muhammad Ali. We got you that one a while ago, and now you're like a two-time. Now people know more about you. This isn't new, but it's news.
Yeah. It was several years ago, but
it's still exciting. This is Karen Heim, the office administrator for PPC, co-star of this week's episode and editor at large of Public Power Underground.
And I'm the creative director of Public Power Underground, who sometimes writes the script and the really kind of annoying things that people don't want to say about themselves, but I make them say it anyway. That's me. The manager of Clatskanie PUD's Power Department and producer for today's recording, Paul Dockery. Great to have you, Bill. Great opening monologue, Bill. That was inspiring. Also, Firefly, great show. Arrested Development, great show. Grateful Dead, I'm not a deadhead. It's not part of my cultural genre. So you can all judge me for that. I'm open to your judgment of not being a deadhead.
I have.
It's okay. Jerry's been dead for 25 years, so there you are.
Yeah, I really found that as an inspiring pitch for Public Power. And you did make sure that we knew that you paid attention to Public Power Underground. I like this.
And for the record, Parks and Rec is available on streaming services, so get on that.
So one could catch up if they had the time.
No.
Especially somebody in public service. I'm sure it will ring home for you.
And then
now wait a minute. You haven't called me on my joke about Fred Lasso.
Yeah, well, we weren't sure if it was a joke or not, and we didn't want to make it awkward.
I thought it was I was like, that is a good joke. I hope that's a joke.
Yeah.
Keep going, Bill.
He's been listening.
He's been listening.
Tuning in.
He's been tuning in.
I know. We should have been ready for Bill, guys. We weren't ready.
It was too late to go back and see all of the past episodes, so.
Yeah, your assignment for next time is to watch Parks and Rec enough to know who you would identify with. Are you a Ron Swanson? Are you a Leslie Knope? Please, this is what we want to know about you, Bill, for next time.
Or Tom Haverford. That's what my money's on for.
Or Tom Haverford. It's possible. It's possible.
What?
Or Andy Dwyer, maybe I'm an Andy Dwyer walking around the world and into a hole in the park.
I can see I have a lot of work to do.
I was going to say, yep. Bill's like, I guess I'll write these names down.
Oh, welcome. I'm really excited about the show. I think we're ready to get into it. You ready, Bill?
I am. All right. This is season 4, episode 13. On today's recording, we'll discuss all sorts of energy news, including Lineworker Appreciation Day, solar developers betting on RTO development, what's going on with the battery supply chain, jumpstarting interregional transmission, Arin reports with Karen reporting, and a bunch of witty banter in between. Before we get started, Dan is going to read a quick word from our presenting sponsor.
The presenting sponsor of Public Power Underground is the Energy Authority. The Energy Authority is a nonprofit energy portfolio management group owned by public power entities like Clatskanie PUD. TEA's mission is to help clients maximize the value of their assets and meet their power supply goals. TEA does this by providing expertise in energy trading, advanced analytics, renewable solutions, and a whole lot more. Over 60 public power utilities have partnered with TEA to tackle their energy future. So if you are looking for an energy authority partner to partner with in navigating the uncertain future of our industry, visit TEAinc.org to learn more. That's TEAinc.org. The Energy Authority, as underground as it gets.
All right, thanks, Dan, I think. We're starting this week, like most weeks, checking in on power market indicators in the Northwest with our first segment, Arin Reports with Karen reporting.
All right, this is Arin Reports with Karen reporting, where we try to get up to speed on Northwest power market indicators for April 25th, 2022. I'm Karen Heim, and I've got your market update for the week. Spot market power in the Northwest for delivery today is at $80.75, with natural gas at $6.15 per MMBTU, translating to a spark spread of $37.70 and a heat rate of 13,100. Spot power in Southern California is at $79.87, and in Northern California at $82.14. May power at Mid-C is up $7 from a week ago to $55.05, and Sumas gas is at $6.04, translating to a heat rate of 9,000 BTU per kilowatt hour. May power at Palo Verde is down $1.40 from a week ago to $53.05. per megawatt hour. August power at Mid-C is trading down $2.55 per megawatt hour from a week ago to $172.30, with Sumas gas at $7.10, translating to a heat rate of 24,000 BTU per kilowatt hour. At Palo Verde, August power is at $249.10 per megawatt hour, down $19 from a week ago. In fish counts, 3,256 adult spring Chinook were counted at Bonneville yesterday, April 24th, bringing the year-to-date total up to 9,513. October through September flows at the Dalles for water year 2022 are currently forecasted to be 95% of normal, and April to September is at 94%. Outflow at the Dalles peaked over the past week at 163.9 KCFS on April 22nd. Day-ending elevation at Grand Coulee yesterday was 1,250, and peak outflow this past week was 149.2 KFCFS on April 20th. Checking in on Entergy's aggregated basin data on snow in the region, the aggregation of all the snow in the Columbia River Basin that'll flow through Bonneville Dam is estimated to be 111.23% of normal. Spending a beat at Bonneville's Balancing Authority, peak load this past week was about 7,739 on April 19th at 7:25 a.m. During load's peak, hydrogen was at 7,126, wind gen was 891, conventional units were 1,194, and nuclear was at 1,161, all units in megawatts. ENSO for January, February, March period sits at -0.9 Oceanic Nino Index, and the multivariate ENSO index for February and March is -1.3. And the SST consolidated Nino forecast indicates that Nino conditions are likely to continue through summer 2022. This week in NOAA climate forecast, the 6 to 10 day outlook has the temp below normal and precipitation above normal for the region. The 30-day outlook issued April 21st shows a leaning toward above normal temperatures and below normal precipitation for parts of Oregon and Idaho. 90-day seasonal outlooks were also updated on April 21st. The temperature outlook shows above average temperatures emanating from the desert Southwest all the way up to Oregon. Lots of Oregon and Washington, lots of red and oranges there. And inversely, but intuitively, the 90-day precipitation outlook is showing a leaning for below average participation across the Northwest. Special thanks to Entergy for letting us use their dashboards, and a big thanks to Luigi for compiling this week's report. That's all we've got for this update. Back to you, Bill.
Thank you, Karen.
Any commentary, any thoughts on the temperature coming this summer? It seems like we're getting into that summer heat wave is starting to come. We've had some cold up here in the Northwest, but the Southwest is starting to get some interesting heat in the forecast. Any thoughts on that? I think it's going to be another hot summer.
We had a pretty good snowstorm in Montana last week, and actually part of this week in southeastern Montana. So I was kind of surprised at the precipitation forecast, or I should say the runoff forecast, and power prices. The runoff forecast seemed a little low. The power prices seemed a little high. I'd be curious thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the cold weather has increased demand, and because it's been cold, we've had lower runoff because it's still frozen, right? So it's not melting. Plus, underlying all of this is really high natural gas prices, right? So that marginal unit's a lot more expensive than it has been historically. And it's actually Northwest has been kind of on the upper range of those Western energy prices, which is really rare for April. Usually we're getting to start to see some of that runoff, and we're going to end up, being at a low price period. So yeah, I think it's the markets this year are really interesting. August prices are still like, what was it, like $250 in the Northwest for August. That's something to keep watching for. The Western Power Pool's West Resource Adequacy Program couldn't come at a better time to kind of help us understand the impacts of all of this, and make the world make sense. Bill, please make the world make sense again.
Bill, it's just a small task.
Right. Something I've not been able to accomplish in the last 40 years. I'm not sure I've got 40 left.
It's like 41 is going to get it done.
Use the time you have, Bill. Use the time you've got, right?
Thank you.
Help us, Obi-Wan.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, if there are no other comments, next up is our weekly walk through public power and public power adjacent news in a segment we like to call Public Power Desktop. Paul, give us the typewriter. Thank you. Take it away, Dan.
So Monday 18th marked Lineworker Appreciation Day. This year marks the 9th annual National Lineworker Appreciation Day, which is recognized every year on April 18th. It was established 2013 by the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives to honor the thousands of men and women who oftentimes risk their lives in hazardous conditions to ensure the reliable delivery of electricity to make sure our lights stay on. So for those of us in the Northwest, the day was celebrated just a week after a snowstorm disrupted our distribution networks across much of the area and required long hours of outage work to get the system back up and running. This is hours away from their family, sleeping. I mean, they really go out in all sorts of weather all year round, no matter what the time. So all the power planning and complex modeling that the industry does is contingent on a continuous conductor from the power supply to the end users. So as electric utility enthusiasts and people who have electricity, we're definitely line worker fanatics at Public Power Underground. So I'd like to add my personal thanks and appreciation. There's been plenty of hours when I've seen Seattle City Light workers out at late hours, all hours of night. And I always make a point whenever I'm like walking the dog to be like, hey, appreciate it.
Well, from my perspective, it's easy for us to talk about the grid as an assumption or almost as an abstraction. Assume a reliable grid, right? But of course, it's not something that happens by chance. There is the planning part, but somebody has to go out and build and maintain the system. It's hard, physical, and sometimes dangerous work. And if there's a fire, a windstorm, a tornado, a hurricane, what have you, these folks run toward the danger, not away. So it's easy for us, at least certainly for me, to forget about the people who are actually out there making it happen. And so just a shout out to the men and women who build and maintain the lines, the substations, the warehouses, the communications that keep the power flowing.
Yeah, it was a bad storm this past week too, and it was kind of a good reminder right before Lineworker Appreciation how valuable the work that goes into this is, how much we rely on them, and the amount of work it takes during these storms, during these outages. And we had a snowstorm, but there are all types of different, like you mentioned, Bill, fires and hurricanes and tornadoes that devastate distribution systems that we got to go rebuild. And we had that, what was it, like April 11th? It sounds like you were getting some of that this past week in Montana. Did you have some outages out there? Have you seen, or is it kind of maintained a pretty reliable system?
No, we didn't. So I live in Missoula. We didn't have much at all. More of the snow was in the southeast. I drove through Billings yesterday. They had more snow, certainly, but I'm not sure there were many widespread outages. I think more to the east, perhaps even far eastern Montana had some, and south into Wyoming.
Yeah. And Karen, so you used to be in Pacific Cores. Are you still?
No, I am not. I am now a PGE person.
Okay.
I mean, still an IOU, but just a different one.
Yeah,
So.
Well, they're both okay. Did you have outages? How did you fare in that storm?
So I did not, but Irene on our staff did. Actually, Irene, Mike Lynn, and Lauren all did. And Lauren actually had hers during our Markets 101 session that we were leading. So it was kind of, I mean, it basically happened where she did the thing that Bill did earlier, which I imagine is going to get edited out, where we were like, is she just not moving, or did she freeze? And so, but we, worked our way through it. So it was totally fine. But yeah, so about half of our staff lost power. So.
Yep. And it is a reminder, Deborah Smith in our interview with her did kind of mention that, like, a lot of these public servants, whether you work for an IOU or public power, we're all doing the same thing, right? The mission of going and providing reliable electric service. There's differences in the business models, which, I would highlight as some of the advantages of public power. But ultimately, we're all just trying to provide reliable electric service to the customers that we serve. And Whether it's PG, Pacificor, or whether Dan wants to come in and make fun of me for something. Go for it, Dan.
No, I was just trying to get in a comment before you, like, somebody moved us along to Karen's story. I was actually talking about this with somebody who does consulting in the industry. So last week I was at the Grid Forward conference in Seattle. Yeah, lots of good content. And I was talking with, met somebody, potential source, who does
unnamed
grid consulting. And he was a former line worker. And he was saying, and I 100% as a journalist, seen this in my career, 100% still agree with it. It's important for people like me who cover it at a high level, like you guys said, grid planning kind of stuff. I don't cover it at the distribution level outside of in as much as it affects operations. But it is really important for me to stay in touch with people like line workers and who have that perspective, because they see how this stuff plays out in the real world. I can say words. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
And like I said, I've seen Seattle City Light people out there all the time walking my dogs, because on our little loop here, we've got a line that's was done in the 60s, undergrounded. It's at the end of its life, so there's a lot of outages. That loop happens to be Northwest Northshire Road and Northwest Sherman. Just for any Seattle City Light listeners.
Yeah.
Because
that'll work. Why not? Bill, you brought this to our attention. You wanted to make sure we highlighted it, so thank you. I think we're ready. For the next one.
All right. Okay, Paul, we're ready for the typewriter. And Karen has the next story.
Yes, I do. Nevada law requires its investor-owned utility, EDV Energy, and all transmission providers in the state to join an RTO by 2030. Reporting by News Data's Abigail Sawyer in the April 15th edition of California Energy Markets dug into the bets by solar developers on the coming boom in transmission expansion and market access such a move might cause. New and experienced developers are submitting applications for utility-scale solar projects on federal lands, some of which are a gigawatt or more of capacity. The projects are mostly clustered in the southern counties near the California border and are currently winding their way through the lengthy permitting process at the state offices of the Federal Bureau of Land Management. If built, the docket of projects would add up to nearly 28 gigawatts in solar arrays alone. The proposed projects and new transmission also lay a good foundation for the creation of a Western Regional Transmission Organization that could help maximize both renewable energy and transmission resources across the Intermountain West. In a phone interview, Cameron Dwyer, senior staff attorney for Western Resource Advocates in Nevada, said an RTO could be helpful in solving many of the challenges of decarbonizing the grid in the Intermountain West and meeting renewable portfolio standard and greenhouse gas reductions goals across the region. But the RTO would need to be established with an eye to creating those solutions, Dwyer said. For more, including a list of applications to the U.S. Department of the Interior Bureau of Land Management utility scale solar projects in Nevada, you can find Abigail's reporting in California Energy Markets with a link in the show notes.
Great. Thank you, Karen. One of the things I found, a couple things I found really fascinating. One was just trying to conceptualize how much space 28 gigawatts of solar was going to take. I realize there's a lot of empty space in Nevada, but my heavens, that's huge. The other piece that I was struck by was, I think included in the report was an estimate or a study that had been done by DOE regarding projects that had been proposed versus those that had actually gone to fruition. It was something like 23% over the time period that they looked at had actually come to full fruition. But even 25% of 28 gigawatts is huge. Just a massive amount of solar. And you think about how the impact of let's say 10 gigawatts of solar in Nevada coming onto the system every single day, and the ramping that's going to be necessary to deal with that, the ramping capability, both up and down, that's going to be necessary to deal with that. It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, so part of the premise of this article is that like an RTO can help manage that because transmission development can help put that somewhere else that it can be better incorporated into the network that has other storage capabilities, and that an RTO may be able to help better manage that transmission expansion. What's your take on that, chair of Western Power Pool? Do you have a perspective on the value of an RTO for doing this type of work?
Oh, whether or not the Northwest develops its own RTO or pulled in one direction with SPP or the other direction with the CAISO, I'm going to let the members of the Western Power Pool decide that. That's not my role.
Yeah.
I think an RTO could help. I was involved in, the 4 or 5 prior efforts at forming an RTO or a market in the Northwest, and I'll confess, helped kill at least one of them because I didn't see benefits for public power from some of the earlier proposals. I think the landscape has changed. Certainly the advent of the massive amount of renewables that have come on, the fact that other parts of the country are joining RTOs. I worked in the Midwest, the Missouri River, for the 6 years prior to my retirement. And one of the things that happened over there to the Western Area Power Administration was, as entities joined the SPP market or SPP, they lost their counterparties. So there was nobody for WAPA to actually do bilateral agreements with. And that, as much as anything, drove them to join SPP. So I see just a lot of factors really pushing us in that direction. And the fact of the matter is, I think if we don't do it ourselves, and again, when I say ourselves, I mean either form one ourselves, join SPP, join CAISO, we're going to be forced to do it regardless. So we're better off making the choice, making the decisions ourselves, and getting it done.
Yeah, that WAPA analogy around the drying up of the bilateral market, I think, is one that's really on the minds of Northwest entities to make sure that we continue to have some entities to transact with in the bilateral markets or moving somewhere else where you can maintain liquidity. This story did kind of help me frame the kind of work efficiency around an RTO, because as you mentioned, Bill, there's this 28 gigawatts of interconnections, right? And somebody, like, you're obligated to evaluate those in a non-discriminatory way. And as you think about renewable development in the Northwest and continuing in the West, there does seem, and maybe I'm wrong, but there does seem to be some efficiency around having this regional organization who's responsible for making it through the queue and doing that, and maybe doing some transmission interconnection efficiencies on how you do that. And maybe that's a more efficient way rather than the federal agency doing interconnections. Dan, didn't you do a story on the interconnection, Bonneville interconnection queue? Was that you?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
But that was a good story that listeners should check out. Also, on that note, look for upcoming coverage from me about market exploration in the Northwest.
Oh, that's a
Not
nice
gonna say
teaser.
more, but yeah.
Okay.
So,
was there an
maybe
undisclosed
Bill,
source that maybe
I'll give you a call? But yeah.
Source familiar with the matter. That's how he wants to be referred to in your story, Dan. Right, Bill? I don't know. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. You shouldn't kid about that stuff. I'm sorry. I just enjoy it. Especially making Dan uncomfortable a little bit.
I've got a pretty high bar for feeling feeling uncomfortable or awkward. You can talk to my wife about it.
Okay.
That's one thing you gotta have a high bar for as a journalist.
Yeah.
There's a lot of awkward, uncomfortable situations that you're like, I just gonna make this even more awkward.
I'm just here to make it more awkward.
Yeah, I got questions and they might make some people uncomfortable, but
That's how you end up getting nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, folks.
There it
That's
is.
if you want advice.
There you go.
If you want advice as a journalist. Bill, is there anything else here you wanted to add on this
Well,
topic? Any
Well,
thoughts?
it was interesting coming down here to Laramie. The front page of the Laramie Boomerang, which is the local newspaper, on Friday had an article about wind development in Wyoming and talking about how in the next few years, they've got about 3,200 megawatts of wind installed right now. They anticipate doubling that. Basically, with if the Anschutz development goes through, and then on top of that, Pacific Core plans to add another 1,150 megawatts. So just here alone in this state, you could end up with 7.5 gigawatts of wind. And certainly significant solar potential here as well, because it's pretty sunny on the east side. So yeah, I mean, I think that is going to put further pressure on a closer examination of an RTO and how that might benefit everyone.
Yeah.
And I'll say again, looking back at the analogy of WAPA's experience and the WAPA customers, WAPA was able to work out an agreement with SPP to preserve transmission delivery for preference customers. So that was to the good. Now, one of the significant challenges that they're still working through over there was basically ultimately eliminating all of the bilateral transmission agreements, the grandfathered agreements.
Oh.
And that is very, very difficult. You should not underestimate how hard that and contentious that can be.
Yeah, Bonneville's got a lot of bilateral transmission agreements, grandfathered, and so that could be an interesting one.
Yep.
Okay, I think I'm ready. You ready, Bill?
I am ready. Okay, Paul, give me the typewriter, and you've got the next prompt.
I do, and it's there's 4 stories I'm going to combine into one topic we're going to talk about. We're going to weave this all together. We'll see how the connections come. The first one is that CAISO is developing a new participation model for energy storage resources called the Energy Storage Resources Model. Well named. CAISO said the growing amount of energy storage warrants consideration of a new market model to ensure storage resources are appropriately compensated and the market can accommodate the unique features of storage, things like battery storage. The straw proposal was issued March 30th, and CAISO was taking comments through May 31st. This happens at the same time we're getting news stories for the second one that Southern California Edison's $1.2 billion, 537.5 megawatt, 4-hour, 2,150 megawatt hour energy storage project, which was scheduled to be operational by August, is facing delays as a result of supply disruptions. Dave Shreve, head of Wood Mackenzie's global energy storage practice, was quoted by Linda Daly Paulson in her April 15th article saying that, quote, force majeure was absolutely being claimed by a number of U.S. developers as a result of COVID, unquote. He also noted that it remains to be seen whether using force majeure is a viable means for developers to avoid project delivery delay penalties. Third, the Wall Street Journal covered Rivian Chief Executive Officer R.J. Scaringe's warning that the auto industry could soon face a shortage of battery supplies for electric vehicles. The direct quote being, quote, put very simply, all the world's cell production combined represents well under 10% of what we need in the next 10 years, meaning 90 to 95% of the supply chain doesn't exist, unquote. And lastly, in our batch of battery stories, Linda Daly Paulson dug deeper into the debate about the factors that could be future choke points for deployment of the technology, with quotes from both Alex Morris, the executive director of the California Energy Storage Alliance, and Dan Shreve, head of Wood Mackenzie's global energy storage practice, who have differing perspectives on the choke points for the development of the battery storage technology. Linda Daly Paulson closed the article with a quote from Dan Shreve saying, quote, it will be terribly interesting to see how market share unfolds in the next couple of years, unquote. I think that is a great summary of these 4 articles with all of the ways batteries are moving throughout our electric markets and the supply chain and supply and demand for those technologies across industries, auto and utility. We're linking to all of these articles in our show notes. There's a lot better and more insightful commentary there.
Yeah, I thought this was some great coverage from my colleagues at News Data, and the since I came on board with clearing up, I've thought one of the most interesting kind of long-term stories is in the industry is figuring out how to quantify the value of batteries, given that it cuts across these areas that formerly were siloed, principally transmission and generation. And I think it's been interesting to watch commissions grapple with that. And so glad to see CAISO it taking on some of that. And that was an aspect, the charge levels, that was an aspect of compensation that I didn't appreciate formerly.
Yeah,
But
state of charge stuff, right? You need to take
yeah,
into account the state
yeah.
of charge on these batteries. That makes sense.
I'll say though that even if we get that figured out, the model for adequately compensating these batteries, none of that matters if we don't have the supply chain. And this has been an aspect that I think has not gotten enough attention. And like the lockdowns in China, as the Rivian story indicates, like this is not going to be a short-term problem after, once those lockdowns are lifted and China can ramp up production. The supply chain is just can ramp up only so much, and like what we need in the West to keep up with bringing on renewables. Oof, we'll see.
Yeah, they use the analogy to the chip shortage, and and the Rivian CEO was saying that chip shortage is just like a very cute little precursor to what we're actually going to see as disruptions to the lithium-ion battery space. But Bill, did you have thoughts on this kind of the battery space supply chain disruptions and the world we're entering into?
Well, first, I'm going to have to go back and read Jason's article again several times to understand exactly what California is proposing. Clearly, there's a lot of work for consultants involved. Last night, apparently, Elon Musk had an earnings call for Tesla, and he said there that he talked about lithium being the limiting factor in the development of electric cars and batteries, and that Tesla may have to get into mining and refining lithium at scale in order to guarantee their supply of this element. It's I read the estimate of global demand for lithium was estimated to go up something like 40 times in the next 20 years, with cobalt, graphite, and nickel somewhere between 15 and 20 times, all for batteries and electric vehicles. So, starting with the mining of the rare earth elements necessary, feeding into ultimately the production capability, which doesn't exist yet. It's a really, really challenging issue. And I too will be fascinated to see how the market responds to advance the production of these different elements.
Yeah, we try to be hopeful at Public Power Underground, and this is part of the energy transition, right? This is the world that we need to be facing. It does seem like, to Dan's point, I've started to actually see a bunch of news articles kind of around this topic recently, and it is starting to get some press. I actually found the Catalyst pod with why am I missing it? Shale Khan just covered it this week. I haven't listened to it yet, but there's a lot of work here to do around making sure that we have access to these rare earths so that we can make the production. But and there's a lot of smart people working on it. One other element I wanted to tie in is there was a recent study that Jesse Jenkins and Jacob Mays published on the electricity markets under deep decarbonization that talks a little bit about the type of market mechanisms you need in order to make sure that in this energy transition, you rethink your market structure, which is part of what CAISO is trying to do, right? Batteries weren't a big part of the grid when you made the market, but now we need to think about it. I think that's another element of advancement, discussion, to make sure we have the mechanisms to do the transition well.
Exactly.
I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, Elon Musk's comment I thought were interesting and reminded me of Ford did similar stuff, 100 years ago and got into antitrust issues about it. So as much as Elon Musk wants to do that, it'll be interesting to see how the legal side of that plays out.
Well, after he finishes buying Twitter, he can take on the SEC and we'll
Right.
see what
If
happens.
he doesn't have enough
Yeah.
on his plate.
Yeah, we got it in. We got it in on today's pod. The biggest news today is that apparently Elon bought Twitter. Like, it just happened. And
Or
it,
they let him buy it. I thought he
yeah.
had tried and they said no. And then they were like, okay,
Yeah.
throw in a couple extra $1 billion. It's fine.
Yeah.
Can we
That's
power electric vehicles with NFTs? That's what I learned.
I think the answer is no.
The answer is no.
The answers.
Because nobody
Yeah.
actually understands NFTs, so they might.
No.
We did
be
a whole
able to power
special.
it.
I did a whole segment with Ellen Groves around NFTs.
Yeah.
I understood it deep
I
enough
was
for
like, do
1
you
minute.
understand them now?
No, I don't, but I have a better understanding.
Right. All I know is they take an awful lot of electricity to mine and
Okay.
generate.
We're just going to do this. They don't have to.
Right.
There's a proof of work.
Proof of work.
And other is a proof of stake.
Right.
And all Bitcoin is proof of work. And that is just a technology we need to be like, hey, that was a great idea. You had Bitcoin. It's just not the future. Ethereal, I think, is transitioning to a proof of stake. And the proof
So-
of stake mechanisms for NFTs, they don't consume a lot of energy, and we can do this. If there's
So
value,
what
in this.
happens to all the people
Dan
that
has
own
something to say.
Bitcoin?
Yeah, so NFTs are non-fungible
Tokens.
tokens, which
Yes.
are not the same though as Bitcoin
As a
and other
cryptocurrency,
things. Yes.
correct. It just uses the same underlying platform, the
Right, but they
distributed
don't
ledger platform.
involve mining. Cryptocurrency,
That-
that
so
I understand.
NFTs, there are some NFTs that run on proof of work
Okay,
underlying
oh, all right.
architecture in the same way that
I-
Bitcoin runs on a proof
Okay,
of work underlying
so
architecture.
Sarah can edit out me incorrectly.
No, you're gonna
No,
leave
it's-
it in
it's
because
good. It's
I'm gonna correct
clarifying.
you.
It's
It's
great.
clarifying. This is
I'm
great.
not
Okay,
getting the
but we are
Pulitzer
running
for
out of
that.
time.
Yeah.
No, but you are
All
getting a
right.
Pulitzer for the next article. Let's see.
Haha.
Paul, give us the typewriter, please. And Karen, you're up next.
All right. Well, our own Dan Catchpole, pictured below me, at least in my lineup, had a feature article in Clearing Up this week covering DOE's $2.5 billion transmission jumpstart program. The Department of Energy plans to release a notice of intent in early May that will provide details on who can apply, how to apply, and the ways applications will be evaluated to get financial backing from the transmission facilitation program. Dan was able to interview friend of the underground Northwest Public Power celebrity and acting a deputy assistant secretary for the Energy Resilience Division in the Office of Electricity at DOE, long title, Michelle Maneri, for the article. Dan quotes her in the article saying, quote, "The main goal for the Department of Energy is to make a wise investment with taxpayer money that we can help get to help accelerate interregional transmission developments," unquote. To get there, at least 20 viable projects in various stages of design and permitting, according to an April 2020 report by Grid Strategies. If the projects were completed, this would add about 8,000 miles of high voltage transmission and 42,000 megawatts of transfer capacity to the U.S. power grid. That would increase the country's transfer capacity by about 12%, the report says. However, that is only 1/10 of the capacity the U.S. needs to decarbonize its power sector, according to the Grid Strategies report. For more info, you can link to Dan's article in the April 22nd edition of Clearing Up, or listen to what Dan has to say right now.
Yeah, I really appreciate Michelle taking the time to sit down with me and talk about this. So this was 2.5 billion, billion of a bunch of money for transmission that was in the infrastructure bill that passed last year through Congress. But everybody I talked to about this said that is nowhere near enough money to jumpstart. The 2.5 billion is nowhere near enough money to jumpstart that many projects, because projects cost hundreds of millions at the least, if not, oftentimes multiple billions. And so if you're buying in 50% into a project to help get it going, which is the idea. I realized this wasn't in your the summary. So the idea was that DOE gets in, buys invests in, gives them financial backing up to half the project costs, essentially, to jumpstart programs that, there's this chicken and egg problem. Developers want to build transmission, but they need generation and off-takers. Generation wants to do more transmission, but they need to know they've got off-takers, which requires having usually requires having guaranteed firm capacity, transmission capacity, and so chicken egg problem. So DOE is trying to step in and kind of solve that problem, but really you can only do 2, maybe 4 projects at a time. And is that enough to make as big a dent, as big a difference as fast as we need it? We'll see.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we've got all those batteries to help us out in the meantime.
Those lithium-ion batteries.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on this, Bill? The transmission expansion and the revolving fund?
I really throw a question back to you guys. It's sort of been my impression that financing is not the problem with transmission lines. It's whether or not you can get it sited. And secondly, whether you've got some sort of offtake agreements to support the financing that you can go get. So financing is the least of your worries, it seems to me, if you're trying to build a transmission line. It's the first 2 problems. Am I wrong in that?
No.
I don't know for sure, but I do think, if you can access debt that will take on more risk, right? So if you have the federal government who's willing to take on riskier projects, maybe you can build a project with less offtakes and stuff. Maybe you can do something more. But I think you're right. The major issue is largely the timelines and permitting in order to get it built. Right? You're right. It's a critical path versus just another issue. And this is another issue, probably not the critical issue that prevents transmission development. Dan was trying to cut me off and correct me.
Go ahead, Dan.
Come on, this is your turn.
No, well, I don't mean to elbow Karen out. So Karen.
No. Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
All right. So I mean, from the reporting that I've done for this story and previous stories, as I understand it, there is plenty of capital out there that's interested and wants to invest in this. So DOE is just trying to bridge that gap between having enough financing to get projects started and kind of like acting as like an anchor tenant sort of. And that, like you mentioned, off takers, like you get into this again, chicken and egg program. Renewable developers don't want to start investing a lot of time in projects unless they know they've got transmission. Transmission doesn't want to spend developers don't want to spend a lot of time investing in projects unless they know they've got stuff coming in on one end and stuff going out on the other end. And so again, there are a lot of projects that are kind of in that limbo. DOE's goal is to step in, bridge that gap, and then ensure that there's the financial confidence behind it for the project to move ahead and other financing to come into it. So yes, the financing is out there once there's confidence that a project's going to go ahead. But to that point, something I've started looking into more, and please contact me if any listeners want to share information or know about this and can educate me, is the siting issue. You can look at a wind map, and as one developer told me, he's like, look, you can look at a wind map, you know what the most valuable places are, but can you site it there, and can you get a transmission corridor to move it from there to the demand centers? And so, like I said, please contact me, listeners, to educate me about that.
I will loop back into an earlier story. We had the Nevada story that talked about solar development, and they referenced this grid Greenlink West, which is one of the projects that Dan referenced. This grid strategy study. It's listed on this map. We have a great visual. If you want to jump over to YouTube, you can just click on the timestamp, and you can check out this wonderful map with the strategies, the 20 transmission projects that Grid Strategies had identified. One of them is Gateway West, that terminates at the start of Boardman to Hemingway. Interesting little project there. We'll run out of time.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we're running out of time. I got to get you out of here by 5:20, Dan.
That's it.
Or Karen.
Let's hit the typewriter and move on. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll close out the episode with a quick rundown of news stories we didn't get to in our TLDR segment we're calling Energy West Lite. First, Paul has a promo. Take it away, Paul.
I actually gave it to Karen. Karen, take it away.
I'm going to take it this week.
It was my edit. I'm bad.
No.
I did not do well this week. Okay.
All right. Northwest Public Power Association believes in public power. For 82 years, NWPPA has supported public power utilities and other associations in the greater Pacific Northwest by offering education, training, communications, government relations, and services like RFP and job postings. In addition to public power, what else is important to NWPPA? Local control, member needs, integrity, and quality products and services. Today, NWPPA proudly serves 155 member utilities and more than 325 utility industry associate members. To learn more or register for a class, go to nwppa.org. That's nwppa.org. Believe in public power.
All right, next up, we are TLDRing our way through the news in a segment we're calling Energy West Lite.
This is Energy West Lite, a segment where we TLDR our way through the news. I'm Paul Dockery.
And I'm Bill Drummond.
And we're lightening up Energy West.
In fish news, the Northwest Power and Conservation Council has approved funding for Columbia Basin hatchery and habitat projects in its Fish and Wildlife program, along with several recommendations for dealing with flat budgets, preparing for climate change, and improving the review process. Reporting on the story by K.C. Mehaffey.
Rick Adair covered a demand-side news out of the Northeast Washington. The current owner of the former Ponderay newsprint plant in Usk, Washington, is trying to work out kinks in its plan to run both newsprint manufacturing and cryptocurrency mining operations using low-cost power provided by Ponderay County PUD. Ponderay newsprint used to use up to 85 megawatts when it was manufacturing newsprint. The current owner, All Rise, is proposing a 300 megawatt first phase and a 600 megawatt second phase of its project.
900 megawatts seems like a pretty big kink. But
that is a proof of work cryptocurrency mining operation. That's what that is.
All right. Linda Daly Paulson is keeping up with the battery beat. Her April 22nd article in California Energy Markets covers California Public Utility Commission's approval of 9 energy storage contracts with a total capacity of almost 1.6 gigawatts proposed by Pacific Gas and Electric. The projects are located throughout the state and are expected to be operational beginning in October 2023. All use lithium-ion battery technology and have long-term resource adequacy agreement contract terms of 15 years.
In addition to energy storage contracts, Linda's story on the April 21st CPUC meeting also covered their adoption of rules for a multi-billion-dollar program designed to ensure all state residents have broadband access, and a new action plan for the state's Distributed Energy Resources Program, the Distributed Energy Resource Action Plan 2.0, or DER 2.0.
The Oregon PUC on April 5th approved Portland General Electric's interim power bill discount program, targeting low-income residential customers, the first ever offered in the state. To maintain a low barrier to enrollment, particularly early on, the program allows income self-certification and will also confer eligibility on groups already participating in low-income energy assistance programs, such as those receiving energy assistance in the Oregon Housing and Community Services System, coverage by Clearing Up's Rick Adair.
Abigail Sawyer covered the April 20th announcement that more than 20 parties representing government, labor, industry, and utilities joined the U.S. Department of Energy in signing a memorandum of understanding in California to collaborate on integrating bidirectional electric vehicle charging into national and global energy infrastructure. Included as signees were the IBEW Local 11 and the Los Angeles chapter of the National Electric Contractors Association, shortened as NECA. Both organizations were initial parties to the MOU and said they would train and provide a skilled workforce to install bidirectional charging infrastructure.
In the news roundup section of Clearing Up, we've got 3 quick stories. First, Oregon has established a $10 million fund to incentivize energy efficient rebuilds of the more than 5,000 structures lost in wildfires in the state in August and September of 2020.
Second, in a nod to the relaxation of COVID-19 restrictions in Washington, Snohomish County PUD recently reopened its headquarter building in Everett and 3 of its 5 community offices to the public. I did see one of my friends, a friend of the Underground, in an office at Snohomish County PUD today. It was great to see him. His background, I guess, is different.
And third, Idaho Power is asking customers and interested stakeholders for feedback as it develops a cost-benefit study of rooftop solar and other customer-owned generation resources. The Idaho PUC ordered the study in December 2021 after the utility raised concerns that the export credit rate was too high.
And drawing a story from outside news data, which might be a preview of an upcoming story from Clearing Up, our own Dan Catchpole, the U.S. Commerce Department announced March 28th that it's investigating solar manufacturing operations in Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia to determine if companies there are circumventing import tariffs by incorporating Chinese equipment and components in their products that would otherwise face U.S. trade restrictions imposed on China. If confirmed by the Commerce Department, it could lead to countervailing duties ranging from 50% to 250% on imported equipment, which could potentially retroactively charges dating back to November of 2021. I was so emotionally invested in making sure I got it right that I made it a little bit jumbled. I'm sorry about that. Dan Catchpole sent us the story, which was covered by the Albuquerque Journal, possibly an upcoming story by Dan Catchpole.
Well, thanks to Public Power Underground's production partners and News Data for letting us use their leads, and thanks to Paul for compiling them this week, since Ian is on vacation. Now back to the crew to close out the episode.
That's Energy West Light.
Gotta work on that.
Nailed it. No notes. Anything we wanted to talk about there? We are on the clock, but we got a couple minutes if anybody wants to dive a little bit deeper.
My thing is I like the paper company. You can't see my air quotes if you're only watching on if you're only listening, but I feel like it's a, oh no, we're not really gonna do that much Bitcoin mining. I mean, obviously they are, because they're getting what, 300 and then 600, but no, I just
it's both. It's both, Karen.
Oh,
it's both.
So 300 and then
Right.
So I don't know. I like that. So good.
As a former newspaper man, sad commentary on the future of newspapers.
Yeah.
Subscribe to your local newspaper.
Yep.
Everybody. And I was actually, so the last paper I was at, the one that got the Pulitzer nominations, Everett Herald.
Oh.
Covering among my beats. Primary, I was the Boeing reporter, but I also covered Snohomish PUD.
Way to bring it all together. Nicely done.
Yeah. Thank you.
There was an interesting related story recently where a Bitcoin miner in Montana had been buying, I think, all of the output of the Hardin generating station, a coal-fired plant in southeastern Montana, and they've announced they're pulling the plug on that because they want to use green power to mine Bitcoin and not coal.
Yeah, Marathon Digital.
Right.
They actually are the only Bitcoin company that I've dealt with that is very transparent and happy to talk to reporters.
Interesting.
It's a very refreshing change. And so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time. I will say, friend of the Underground, Josh Tran, asks me all the time when we're going to cover these tariffs and the Trade Commerce Department stuff. And so, Dan, you got to cover
Tell him
this.
to contact me.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that he's a source for you, but he's really interested. So I'll send him the article once you write it.
That's all the news we're covering this week. The next regularly scheduled episode will be recorded May 9th and published May 12th. To make sure you don't miss it, or bonus episodes in the meantime, you can sign up for an unintrusive newsletter with links to all the ways to consume this fascinating content at publicpowerunderground.substack.com. Otherwise, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast app. You can also find our merchandise on Shopify by searching for Public Power Underground.
Hey, wonderful job being the celebrity guest host this week, Bill. Do you
Thank
feel
you.
valued and appreciated? Do you like this? This was fun,
do.
wasn't it?
Once I got my camera working and solved all the other issues today, yes, it's been fun.
Good. And we're getting it under the wire, Karen. You got to go in 2 minutes, but do you feel valued and appreciated?
I do. I always do.
Okay. Well, it's probably the last scheduled appearance on Public Power Underground for a while because your due date is forthcoming.
Oh,
that's right.
And we did get you in right before to make sure that everybody would have something in the feed to go listen to.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
I always appreciate
we missed
you
that
very
in the
much.
banter. Congratulations, Karen.
Thank you.
Yes. And Dan, do you feel valued and appreciated?
Always, Paul.
I love this dynamic
hope
we have.
We reciprocate the feeling.
Yeah, I love this this relationship we're building, Dan, where we can be honest and forthright to each other, and we're still friends. It's great.
That makes me scared for the next phone call I get from you.
Hey, Energy
It's
West
okay.
is
He's
really
good with
pulling it
awkward.
together.
He got good with awkward
Yeah.
situations.
No,
I
so-
did notice.
Paul,
Okay, I'm
your
just going to put this
feedback
out there.
has been great.
Yes, I try to be honest. But Abigail, when she was on last week or 2 weeks ago, she said she was going to be on Energy West. I was refreshing the app. I was like, hey, I'm really curious to listen to Abigail on Energy West. Her episode never got published. There's a story there. You're going to have to tell me offline because we only have 1 minute left.
Yep.
Okay, we're ready, Bill.
Okay, wrapping up. As always, send any news, questions, opinions, corrections, or complaints to Paul on Twitter at a Power Manager. Or if you're a friend of the Underground, you can send any of us a note. You don't have to be subscribed to News Data's weekly newsletters to get this podcast, but it sure makes the podcast make a lot more sense. That's all for this week. Thanks for tuning in.
Come and join on. Roll on, enthusiasts, roll on. We bring in some people way smarter than us.
Public Power Underground is a production of Klatskin IPUD and News Data. The views expressed here are our own and not the official views of Klatskin IPUD, News Data, or the organization of the guests. Also appearing on Public Power Underground, Western Power Pool, not endorsed anything Bill said. Public Power Underground is public power and public power adjacent news from a power department's perspective. It's written and directed by Klatskin IPUD's Power Department, led by me, Paul Dockery, and it's edited and published by the stellar team at Pioneer Utility Resources, led by associate producer Sarah Wooden. Our theme song, Roll On Enthusiasts, was rewritten, performed, and recorded by Arin, Guillory, and Ian Bledsoe. Special thanks to our celebrity guest host for participating in this week's episode. Thank you, Bill, for doing it. I really appreciate everything you brought, including the pitch for Public Power. Thank you so much. Public Power Underground is for electric utility enthusiasts. Public Power Underground, where you're valued and appreciated.